Hello, ladies and gentlemen out there on the interwebs. My name is James Murua. Welcome to the James Murua Literary Podcast. Same name, same live stream. Today I'm really excited because if you're tuning into this, you know that this is a conversation between somebody from Africa and somebody from Germany, and it's a cooperation between James Murua Literary and Frankfurter Buchmesse with financial support from the German Federal Office. Our guests today are Tete Loeper and Asal Dardan. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
Hello, James.
Thank you. I'm really excited you're agreeing to come to the session. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just introduce, I'm going to introduce you first so that, the audience knows who you are. I'll start with Tete, born in Rwanda. Tete Loeper is a writer, theater director, and creative lecturer with a degree in journalism and communication. Her work explores topics like migration, intercultural relations, decolonization, and global North-South partnership. Her debut novel, Barfuß in Deutschland, is published by Orlando Verlag. She lives in Germany. Thank you for joining us, Tete.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Asal Dardan was born in Tehran and grew up in Cologne and Bonn and Aberdeen after her parents fled Iran. She studied cultural studies in Hildesheim and Middle Eastern studies in Lund. As a freelance author, she writes for Zeit Online, the FAZ, and the Berliner Zeitung, among others. She was awarded the Caroline Schlegel Prize for Essay Writing for her text Neue Jahre, New Year, and nominated for the German Nonfiction Prize in 2021 and the Clemens Brentano Prize 2022. So, Asal, I hope I didn't butcher too many things in that introduction.
No, lovely.
So, Asal, I know you're tuning in from Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
And Tete, where are you tuning in from?
I'm tuning in from the German Black Forest.
Black Forest. Okay.
Yes.
You're welcome, as you say in Kenya, Karibu. Tete, you were in Rwanda this year. How was that, by the way?
It was very nice. I was in Rwanda in October this year. There is a theater play that I wrote and I was directing it. And we did it with the Goethe Institute. Everything went well. I stayed for 2 weeks.
Okay. So, and how did the guys welcome you? I mean, how was the experience?
The experience was good. I had the chance to do my first reading event in Rwanda, in Kigali, and I was happy with the audience. Like the audience was mainly younger generation, which I was not expecting. Somehow, I don't know why, but I was not expecting it. And I felt very happy to do a book reading in a room or in a space where I didn't feel as being the minority. And that was very satisfying for me. And we discussed. And then we had like 1 week and a half for rehearsals for the theater play. And the performance, we had also a big audience. Many people came. It was nice.
Nice. Asal, have you been back to Iran?
No, I can't. For political reasons, I haven't been back to Iran since I was born there.
Nice. So today we're chatting memoirs, and you are the one who has actually finished a memoir. Like you finished a work of fiction, which centers your own experiences. Could you tell us a bit about the reflections of a female barbarian?
Yeah. I'm sorry, James. I didn't hear your entire question. There was a glitch. So if you could repeat it.
Oh, okay. I said you're the person here who has nonfiction work, which with you as a subject.
Yes,
and
yes.
And I want you to tell us about Reflections of a Female Barbarian.
Yes, it's an essay collection, and it's actually quite interesting because it was published in the Fine Literature at my publisher, but Belletristik in German. But later on was nominated for a nonfiction prize, and I feel it sort of shows what personal essays how they can be viewed, because it has a literary quality to it. The language is literary, but it is based on, it starts with me being a young child in Cologne, in a high rise in Cologne with my parents, the first place where we lived after they fled. And the chapters are loosely based or connected through my life, my youth, and then my time as a student, and then later on my motherhood, and other moves I made, to Sweden. I have 2 chapters that are about living in Sweden as well. And so, yeah, my life is sort of what ties these essays together in a way.
Mm-hmm. So I see how, I mean, I read the because it's written in German, and I read the sample chapter in English, and I really loved it. It was
Thank
really
you.
good. I can see a bit of, like you mentioned, you've actually come from academic writing and other. How did you get to this space of writing this type of essays? What's the time? What's the journey?
Well, it's something that's quite typical, I guess, for female writers. I was an academic. I was trying to get into a doctoral program. Then I became a mother, and it was, to juggle earning money, writing and researching academically, and being a mother was quite too much to handle on the one hand. And I also felt that the things I wanted to write about, the things I wanted to say and express, the academic language and the academic world is a bit too limited or just different from what I was looking and searching. And a lot of the writers I admire, or who made a deep impression on me, are essayists, and I felt that's sort of the type of writing I wanted to pursue. And a lot of these ideas I had, which went into the book, these are things I was thinking about for many years. These are things that happened to me long ago, and had been slumbering in me as a story. And at some point I just wrote them down, and I knew I had to put them together in one book. At the same time, I didn't just want to tell a story about my life. I don't find that so interesting to just, because I'm also not a prominent person or very famous or anything. So what I wanted to do is, or how I often describe my book, is that I didn't want it to be a mirror in which I see myself, but I wanted to turn it into a mirror for others, to maybe find something about themselves and their lives and the society we share and we live in. That's why each essay combines sort of elements of my own life with reflections, as in the title, on the societal issues.
That is fascinating. I think I want to bring Tete in here. I want to hear about, because what is already available to us for us to read is Barefoot in Germany. It's a fiction title. How did that come along? I know there was a mother story in there, if I'm not very wrong, about how Barefoot in Germany came to exist.
Yeah, Barefoot in Germany came from, like, when I was new in Germany, I realized how, when I was learning the language in my language class, we were many different immigrants from different countries and continents. And I wanted to know, why did these people choose Germany? Because, like, for example, me coming from Rwanda, if I would have went to France or England, then I wouldn't have had the struggle of the language. So I was interested in knowing, why did they come to Germany, and also the experiences. How is life in the country compared to how they expected life to be before they come? Because myself, I had some expectations. I thought, like, in Germany, life is like this and like that. So I had a conversation with 8 different women, and then I combined their stories, mixed also with my own experience in Germany, the challenges I was facing. And I also took the part of growing up in Rwanda there is a quarter called Nyamirambo, the capital city in Kigali.
Mm.
That part is like another country on its own. When you are there, life is totally different from other parts of the country. So I took the image of how is the lifestyle of a young woman growing up in Nyamirambo, and then who gets a chance to go abroad. All of that, I combined it in Barefoot in Germany. And I also wanted to show like people who plan to come to Germany to kind of have like plan A and B, because there are expectations that we carry when we are coming here, and then there is what is really happening, life we go through. And when there is no plan B and the plan A fails, it becomes difficult.
Mm.
Yeah.
How did the I know you I know your this title you published yourself, it was self-published. How did you because I know you come from the theater and acting space. How did you go from you're doing this different art form and now you're writing a novel?
Actually, when I started to write Barefoot in Germany, I was thinking of making like a serial radio drama where, like, per week we will be listening to a story of one person and then one story per week. And then I talked to the creative director of the theater company I used to work in. I was asking him, like, I have this idea, we can do it together. And he's the one who told me, just write it on your own, like, go on and do your things. And I started writing it as different short stories. And as I was working on it, I realized, how am I? I just arrived in Germany. I'm new. How am I going to put up like a theater, radio, drama? I didn't know anybody in the radio. I didn't know how to do that on my own. And then slowly, once I had it finished, I spoke again with the creative director from the theater company. And he's the one who told me, there is also self publishing. You can do like this and like this. And he gave me contact of a very good editor. It was an American woman who was living in Rwanda. And I wanted someone living in Rwanda who would understand where I'm coming from. Why am I writing it in the way I wrote it? I wanted to keep also some sentences still in my mother tongue. And she did a good job. Then she also recommended me a good designer, and it was like a teamwork, but everything, it was self-published.
That's such a wonderful story. Asal, what about yourself? How does this barbarian, apart from finishing the essay, how do you get to a point where we are seeing it?
Well, for me, it was a bit different. I actually don't know if I would have written the book at this stage and in the way it was written if I hadn't been contacted by an agent. I had written an essay for Zeit Online, which she had read and liked, and she contacted me and said, "I like your writing. Have you ever thought of writing a book?" And then I kind of sat down that afternoon after I talked to her and wrote down 9 of these 10 essays. I mean, the sort of what they would be about, like little summaries. And I knew then that I had this book in me and I would want to write it. But it wasn't like I had the urge to write it and was looking for someone. And then, yeah, I signed my contract with her. And after about a few months, I had written 3-4 essays. And then we went on search for, we looked for a publisher. And in the beginning, it was a bit difficult because some publishers really liked the language, but they said it should be fiction. Why is it not fiction? Or some people actually wanted to make it a real classical memoir of a migrant's life in Germany, And I kind of wanted to stick to its form. And I'm very lucky that my agent she supported me in that, and she didn't try to talk me out of it. And then we found the right publisher for the book. And the process took about 1.5 years.
So what happened when the book came out? How was the response of the market?
Well, I mean, I don't think it sold a lot. I mean, it sold well, but I mean, and people don't buy books anymore. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, no, but I mean, it sold well, I mean, it went into second, how you say, edition after it was nominated for the non-fiction prize, and but it was the critical response was amazing. I mean, I was really astonished that because I considered it to be quite a niche book, but so it was really overwhelming. I got to travel with it a lot. I had a lot of lovely readings and events and met a lot of interesting, lovely people, and had especially fantastic events where I met other writers who were writing on similar topics, and that was the most enjoyable bit. Like now with Tete, for example, to just come together, and because in the end, if you only talk about yourself, it kind of is a bit boring for yourself, But if you meet someone else and you kind of talk about similarities or differences, and I find that much more interesting and exciting. So yeah, I mean, it's been a fantastic, now almost 2 years, and I've started writing on my next book, which will not focus so much on myself, but I was really pleased with the reception and feel very how you say gifted through this experience. Yeah.
Tete, what about you? When the book came out, because it came out in Germany,
Yeah.
how was the response to its coming out?
The response was like the beginning, I got a bit scared and I started regretting, like, why did I really do this?
Oh no.
Let's say, like, from the neighbors or people who know me, like the Germans who know me in my circle. It was the first person who asked me, because in the book I criticize a bit the society, the German society, but also the Rwandan society. And there is one old neighbor, she told me, are we really that bad? And I was like, it's just a book, it's a story. So realizing that people who were somehow close to me, they took it very personal and they were like, so you live with us, but you feel in this way about us. It made me in the beginning think like, why did I write about this? And then there was also one time someone asked me directly, I was at a book reading and the person asked me how long I have been living in Germany. I said, and was like, so you just came only 5 years living here and you give yourself the permission to criticize the society like this? And then I slowly realized, but actually this, I should see it as positive feedback to see like there are other people who live here, they say like other immigrants who live here, but they haven't yet wrote it in a way that makes people in the society feel a bit shaken, like kind of offended that they reflect on themselves. And that I liked it. So I started using it as seeing it like on a strong point. And because I work in educational institution, they asked me if I can start reading the book for schools, like high schools, make like a debate around the book. And that was very good to see that there are so many things the younger generation would like to talk about, like discrimination and racism and migration, but they don't know where to start from. And the book has been working as like a door opener. So it's like breaking the ice and they start talking about it. The outcome was good and I'm still very happy with the result I get.
What about how the book became, because it was initially in German and it was translated into, no, in English,
In English,
then it
yeah.
went to German. So give me that journey from, from you have the book in English and now it's a German.
Yeah, the book was in English, and slowly, as I got more people who are interested in it, I realized actually if I only keep it in English or if it stays in English, it's not reaching all the people that is talking to. And then I worked together with there's one woman, a translator called Madeleine. She's German, and she's the one who was like, I can work with you, and we translate it. So then, once we had it finished, translated, it was very important to find a publisher who will bring it on the market, because I didn't know how to do marketing and everything on the German market. Then I started searching. And the beginning, the publishers I came in contact with, there's one that I really wanted to work with, but they wanted that I make it more in the direction of nonfiction. Because I say that 70% of the book is actually my own experience, and 30% is fiction that I created. So they wanted to we make it a nonfiction, and I was not comfortable with it. And then I kept like contacting different. And how I ended up at Orlando, then I read the book from Orlando. Is a book of another African woman living in Germany. And I was like, this sounds like maybe right for me. I contacted them. Somehow it was a match. And then they started working on the book.
Orlando is a fantastic publisher. They have fantastic, yeah.
I also
Have
like
you
it.
worked, have you worked with them, Asal, or you know them
No,
very
I
well?
haven't worked with. I mean, I actually on my desk I have several of their books because I cite them. I used one of their. It's a classic. It's called Farbe bekennen, which everybody knows. It's a German, it's essential reading in Germany, and yeah, so I cited it, and I think Orlando does fantastic work. So it's a good,
Also think so.
good place to be as a writer, I think.
So I want to ask you, like, from your academic spaces and from your nonfiction spaces, I mean, because today I want to chat a bit about the memoir, because a lot of people always assume the memoir is, like the autobiography. It has to be written by somebody who is in their 70s and and and
Whoops.
so tell me how do you end up doing the memoirs? How does that work?
Well, I think if, I mean, looking back on a life, of course, is also worthwhile, and is one aspect of memoir writing. You can say something about the time you worked in or grew up in, and that is fantastic. But I feel that if you are part of a society where you want to position yourself, and your position from where you're speaking is not obvious, is not like the normative position, the one that is, what is considered, the main narration of the society, so to speak, then it's quite good to make yourself transparent. And that has nothing to do with age or experience per se, but with perspective, from where your standpoint is. Where do you look at, where are you looking from on society that you write about? And I think it's, I mean, you can also write a book and not make that transparent, but I wanted to show how my interactions are, how, and I didn't want to make it seem like I know it all, and I've always been at this point in my life. I wanted to kind of show the development, the intellectual development, the emotional development, also the way one tries to fight oneself into society and suddenly notices, because I grew up here. I was a baby when I came to this country. I never really considered myself to be foreign until I kind of noticed that others project that on me, you see. And so it's a sort of thinking about the book is a sort of thinking out loud with others about how this development, took place, and from where I look. So it's a transparent way of, and a literary way of placing yourself in the society that you live in. And I think any life, I mean, the thing is, our stories are we are the only ones who could tell these stories, like that's the one story no one else can tell. And I think it's there's a lot of value in it, and if you try and do it as authentic and openly and really also not in a vain fashion, I think you have to kind of swallow down your vanity and really be, truthful. And then I think that there's a lot of gain. I mean, who would say Greta Thunberg shouldn't write her memoir?
I'd love to read that, actually.
Yeah, or Malala. I mean, it has nothing to do with age. It's about how you look, how you relate to your environment and your world and to people around you.
Tete, you come from writing fiction, and now you're writing your memoir. First, please tell me, when is it coming out in Orlando? And then, how are you translating that now to the nonfiction world? When do you stop? Like, at what age do you stop? What's the process for you?
Yeah, what age? That's a good question. When the book is planned to come out is sometimes in the next year. So this year we are starting 2023. With the publishing, you never know when exactly, but sometimes around June, July.
Mm.
And I started writing a memoir because somehow I felt comfortable with telling my own story. Before I started writing a book, I was not sure. I feel like putting outside the memoir is going to be like the whole world is seeing me naked. And I would not like that. But then slowly I realized if I don't tell my stories, who else is going to do it? And I decided I'm going to tell it, write it, and get it out there. And I was home, like I was in Rwanda. I was at my mother's house. And we were looking at some photos, like old photos of when we were kids, the few ones that she still has. And then there are some photos that I asked her, I was like, do you have photos when I'm around 5 and 7 years, like starting school? And she started telling me, no, I don't have them because everything was burned and stolen during the genocide. So I started questioning her, like, okay, how was it? And how was life before then the genocide, everything? And I realized that somehow we underestimate the memory of the kids, that we think in their memories they forget things easily. And I would tell my mom some things, and she was surprised that I know it. She asked me, like, nobody told you that, and you know it yourself? And then I took it as a challenge to challenge my brain to see, like, what do I really remember myself that nobody told me? And I wrote down what I remember myself. Then I went back to my mother. I was telling her, like, I remember this, but what happened between this time and that time? So it's a memoir, it's my memoir. But if my mother would be writing, she would be like the co-author of the memoir because she was
I'm
also telling me a lot of stories from that time.
I'm seeing quite a few memoirs from Rwanda in the recent past. You want to tell me a little bit about that?
About the memoir?
I'm seeing more than one or two memoirs coming out of Rwanda in the last decade, actually. What's the story there? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Generally, it's a culture of storytelling. So
Mm.
before we have been having a lot of stories, but not written, where in the communities, like the older people tell stories to the younger ones. And slowly it's like people are reconnecting with that culture, realizing like, hey, it's my story and the world wants to read it, or someone somewhere may read it, and they're writing their stories. It's also kind of like to encourage the generation of today. Let's say like me, I'm from the generation that is growing up after the genocide but born before it. So how does one manage that from having a childhood where you completely lose everything and then you manage to shape a life? And when I read like books, memoir from other people, I realize like, so they managed like this kind of resilience that you can hardly understand, like how does one really do this? And it's good to tell our stories. And also the problem is like before we have many stories about Rwandans, let's say like the part of the genocide that are not written by us. I have read some books where like someone who was working for the Red Cross spent a few days in Rwanda, goes back, writes a book, then goes around the whole world telling people about stories and reading the book. And now we are people who are realizing, hey, we want our stories to tell them as they are, not as someone else saw it from outside. Yeah. And now how I feel now, I think I'm even going to stick in the line of memoir for a few years until I go back to fiction.
Yeah, so you're in the nonfiction memoir space for a minute.
Yeah.
Asal, like I there's this language thing. You write primarily in German.
Yeah,
Um,
that's my
yeah,
main one.
have you been translated outside so that those of us who are not in speak German are able to read your work?
Well, I'm now part of a project where I write letters to a Ukrainian writer, poet, Dariana Gladun. Uh, and so my letters to her get translated into Ukrainian, which is totally mind blowing to me. And a few of my essays have been translated into English, but nothing, but except for the one that you read, nothing's really published as of yet. And it's not so easy to be translated from German into English. There's, unless you've been a bestseller or something, there's hardly a market for German literature in translation. But I mean, yeah, I do. I actually am translating right now from English into German. So I've always had a love for translation, and I would love to be translated, of course. I mean, who wouldn't? But not yet, not quite yet.
Um, it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the nonfiction space in Germany? How does it look like? Who are the main people we need to look out for?
Yeah. Well, that's a very broad question. In Germany, there is a very good, stable space for nonfiction. I think they are, people read nonfiction and engage with it, and there are quite a lot of publishers who are specialized on nonfiction. But there's also always, like the big ones. They also just have nonfiction branches, and I don't quite know what you mean. Like, do you want me to name publishers or?
Okay, maybe you can give me some of the names of some of the memoirs. Who are the people who've written memoirs that maybe we want to, somebody who wants to write a memoir, who would they want to read so that they can get some information, like inspiration?
Yeah. Okay, that is. There is a. I quite like these books where someone writes about their life, but also tells something about a phase in history. So there are some lovely books out there that do that. For example, there's by a anthropologist. I was nominated with her for the nonfiction prize, and she wrote a book about her time in Africa, about her expeditions as an anthropologist. And now she's in her I think she's in her 70s, and she's reflecting on her own limitations, her own racist traps, the mistakes she made, or how her field was also very male dominated, white dominated. But I'd have to research for a moment what the title of the book is. I'm kind of, and then of course in Germany there is quite a big field of memoirs of people who survived the Holocaust, of course. And I think that relates a bit to what Tete said, because they also, many of them wrote them 20, 30 years later, because I think that's how memory works, and especially collective memory, or when you start memorizing things that have a collective dimension and are, a genocide. I think there needs to be a specific certain amount of time, they say a generation, before you can turn back and actually look at those traumas. And there are, I mean, Ruth Klüger, for example, is a classic in memoir writing in Germany. But I didn't know I should come with a list.
No,
of,
the thing is, I want to know the things you have in your top of your head.
Okay.
You don't need to do
No,
homework.
actually, one of my all-time favorite books, but that's not German, is Stuart Hall's autobiography, which is called. I actually have it here. It's called Familiar Stranger, and I already think the picture is so lovely because he's a leading intellectual, but the picture chosen is him and his family, in a sort of and Familiar Stranger, I think, is also such a great title for an autobiography because it sort of shows that you know yourself, but you also don't, you're even a stranger to yourself, especially when you grew up between two worlds like he did. And I love this book so much. It's one of my favorite because he reflects his life and how he grew up on these two different islands, Jamaica and England, the UK, and reflects the sentiments of the people that surrounded him and talks very openly about it. So for me, this is like a beacon, of memoir writing. And I think it's a masterful memoir.
I have to mention, when I read the chapters you sent, I actually saw this. Like you're somebody who belongs in two different worlds.
Yeah.
You're writing about a world which you exist in which you really don't belong to, and then you're writing about a world which you came from, which you also don't belong to. You want to speak a little bit about that when you come to writing memoir?
Yeah, I think at the moment, the most exciting biographies in a way are the hybrid ones, people who combine many different, different aspects. And I think by writing about myself or my life, I wanted to show that people still think in binaries. They think like you're in two places, but what you actually are is you create something entirely different. You can't cut it. You can't say, okay, this bit of me, my cooking is Iranian, but my thinking is German, or it doesn't work that way. You're a hybrid. You mix it, and everyone trying to make you define yourself. Like, what are you really? Where do you really come from? What are you really German? Are you really Iranian? Like, no, I'm sort of I don't want to define it. I don't want to position myself. Everything that I define is like already wrong, so I wanted to show this hybridity, and I think that a lot of biographies now are like that. People move a lot. They have like, for example, my children, my ex-partner, he's Swedish, and I have Swedish kids, I mean, it somehow happened that I'm the mother to these Swedish boys, and I don't know how much they will, when they grow up, know about Iran or Farsi. I mean, they eat the food, but when my older son, when he was younger, he would often say, "Mom, do you come from Italy, India, or where?" And I said, "No, it's Iran, because it's both things with the I," and he didn't know which one of those countries, And in the end, it doesn't really, it's what they can pick from it. I want it to be alive, and I think that's also what I learned from Stuart Hall, to kind of let the fluidity and that things change. I have now, as the older I become, the more I actually turn towards Iranian history and my Iranian side, especially now with the political situation in Iran. I feel closer to it. I don't think you're always one. You know, you sometimes move away from it, you come back and you reflect, and so memoir is never only about the time you lived, but also the time you wrote it. You know, this book in 12 years, I'd write it completely differently, even if I tell exactly the same stories, you know.
That's so good. Tete, I mean, you mentioned you know a bit about the Rwandese literatures community, the literary space. Do you want to tell us a little bit of how does it look like?
How does it look like for the moment? Like most of the writers we have in Rwanda, so they are going in the direction of self-publishing. You know, Rwanda before used to be francophone, like French system, everything. And then we shifted. So there is a generation of Rwandan writers we have who were writing in French before only. And during that time, we had like one or two publishing companies, and they had their market in the French speaking spaces. So now, when the language changed to Anglophone, like using English, this publishing company, they couldn't catch up like quickly with the market and everything. And then the writers also they couldn't switch immediately to English. And now there is, I would call it like a new wave of writers who are writing in English, and publishing is expensive, like self-publishing. But they come together and they self-publish and they organize like events, promote each other like that. And I like how, like, so far we have two publishing companies. There is one called Imagine We, and Imagine We is doing amazing job when I see like the authors they are writing, and they look for people who are writing about topics that are a bit like critical. Doesn't matter whether it's fiction or non-fiction, and they go in that direction. And they try their best to do marketing, promote everywhere. And then there is also another one called Huza Press. Huza Press is also doing a good job how they are working with authors and pushing literature very far. Unfortunately, how I experienced inside in the country, for example, they kind of don't really read and buy books of the authors who are still living in the country.
Mm.
Like someone living in Rwanda would buy my book, for example, or buy a book of Jordan Skaitesi, who is also a writer living abroad, but they don't buy the books of the people who are living there or read their stories. And until now, I haven't yet understood why. And even the publishers themselves, they tend to be more interested in publishing with authors who live abroad, like Rwandan authors, but who don't live in the country. And then they publish and afterwards bring the books back home. I don't know why it's like that, but on the other hand, what is very positive is the scene is growing. We have a national library, for example, and the national library has space offered to Rwandan authors who want to do event, book reading, whatever has to do with books. And that's very good. And I still hope that it's going to grow a lot. Maybe if Netflix slows down in the country, people can become closer to books. I don't know. And what I liked is also that, you know, me when I was going to school, even still at university, we read only books about, I don't know, Napoleon Bonaparte and the Petit Prince, like mainly French stories
Mm.
with things that we didn't even really understand and relate to. And that killed the drive of reading or the interest of reading among people of my generation because we just read for reading without understanding the story.
Mm.
And
Mm.
now realizing that there are some people who enjoy reading books from Rwandan authors or African authors, it's giving hope that slowly they will keep up realizing actually she's talking about something happening in Kigali and I live in Kigali. So it will encourage the culture of reading because they will read something they can relate to.
I
Now,
think that's very, very true. I remember Leila Slimani saying something similar about
Mhm.
Morocco. They would just read French books, and they didn't even know or think about that their lives or their perspectives were also worth telling. And in a way, in Germany, it's similar, like migrants understanding that it's worth telling our family stories, or it doesn't only have to be Günter Grass. Like we can also write our books, and our families have different names and they eat different things.
Mm.
Yeah.
And Tete, I mean, I also want to ask you about, because you just told us about the the scene of your country of birth, but I know you also joined a literary community in Germany that I think it's called okay, let's see. Sharon Olago asking, how are the authors using audiobooks to target those who prefer to listen rather than read? Azal, we start with you.
Well, there's no audiobook out, unfortunately, from my book. It's it's the publishers that decide whether they make a deal with a audio publisher or not, or a streaming. And in my case, they didn't. And it's really not in the hands of the authors, unless you, of course, Sharon, as an author, negotiate, or if you really put effort into, your publisher putting it out there. I know that there is a growing market for it, and I think it's very interesting. And a lot of authors also decide to read their books in themselves, which can have an appeal, but it can also be great if a professional art, speaker or actor, actress does it. But yeah, I have no experience with audiobooks. No.
Tete?
I have had essays being read for radio, which I found very exciting and humbling, but not my book.
Tete?
I met a woman actually last month in Frankfurt, and she's a professional speaker and moderator. And she was moderating at an event I was in, and somehow I liked her accent. Like me, I spoke with my publisher about doing audiobook, but I haven't yet met someone who has the accent I like, because I wanted someone who speaks German, but with a strong foreign accent. So I talked with her, and we are discussing about it. Probably it's also coming out beginning of next year. So my publisher is looking for like a distributor, the company that we work with. They like the idea, and this Nadia has a voice that sounds a bit like a Rwandan speaking German.
That's great.
So next year your audio book and your memoir is likely to come out. So 2023 is your year.
2023 is going to be working, no sleeping. But for the audiobook, it will be mainly then with the speaker and the publisher working on that.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sharon, for your question. So Tete, I was asking you about like the community. I think you call it the people of color or African community in Germany. Do you want to speak about a little bit about that community? I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, so the way this community it is, for example, it started from, there was at the Frankfurt book fair, this issue of racism and exploded somehow. And then one girl from Frankfurt, she decided she wants to organize also like a mini pop-up book fair where people of color will feel like this is our space and they're welcomed, not where they will be taken to places that awaken their trauma or that makes them feel like we are treating you like external, or we are doing you a favor to be here. So she started this small community book fair, and I was there for the first time. And what I find like somehow was extreme. It was open event; anybody could come. But the first row of the seat they have put a label like only for people of color. So the people of color were allowed to sit on the first row. And then the stories that were discussed there, or the books that they read, you could hear that many people felt like, I can relate to the story. I see myself and I fit in there. It was very nice, and it's happening every year. It's a community of different people. It's not easy, not only with the skin color or anything, but for foreigners coming here in Germany to connect with the publisher or the literary agent to come in the scene, because literature in Germany is still very much white dominated. So it's very good for people of color to have that other space. And then some publishers or other people, like the white community, they even look for writers in that community and they negotiate, like working with them. So far, I know two who were approached because the publishers got to know them from that community. It puts them also on a level of being able to negotiate, not just taking whatever they are offering. That's good.
Asal, are you part of this community?
Well, there is a very strong Afro-German community, which I have friends in and of course watch, and I'm very interested in what comes out of it. But of course, I'm not Afro-German, so I'm not part of it. But I have been talking a lot to mainly women of color who also write. And we've often been saying that we kind of need to build stronger networks, exchange experience, and these things more often, and also look out for each other and amplify each other. And I think that's very important. And as Tete said, German. I mean, the scene of writers is changing quite rapidly, but the publishers and the critics, they're all white still, So and the thing is that, of course, we as writers, we're finding each other now. We're coming together. We're talking to each other, and I think nice things are growing there. And I mean, yeah, in terms of Afro-German scene, it has been growing since the 70s, 80s, and now I think is again also being recognized more in the mainstream. And Orlando, for example, is one of the publishers who's done a lot for it. Sweetie pie.
Yeah.
My kid just came in. It happens on BBC, doesn't it? So he's walked out again. He's like, Mom.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's what working moms, Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Like, do you have any of you, do you have a question for each other as you think about that? Do you have one already?
Yeah, I would really like to ask Tete how it is for her to be part of basically the German literary scene, but without writing in German. I mean, do you consider yourself also like a writer in Germany, of course, but do you feel like you are, or have the need or the desire to be seen as a German writer as well, or someone who writes in Germany, because I feel that there's so many writers in Germany who don't write in German, and somehow I feel they're still a part of our literary scene,
Yeah, that's a good question. So there was a time, for example, when there was a point I realized that this is never going to be possible, and I stopped forcing it. So I live in Germany, but let's say when they invite me to literature festival, they introduce me as Tete Loeper from Rwanda. And then I realized, so I live in this community, I'm part of these people. But because, that there's something I feel like in Germany, living in Germany, your roots matter very much. So if they keep seeing me like Tete Loeper from Rwanda, I also don't want to force myself in there. So I will be writing in English, and I plan even to write in German because now I can. But I don't want to be so much seen as a German writer or being in the German community. it gives me also more room open. If they keep seeing me as a Rwandan, then I know I'm a Rwandan, I'm also a German, and I stay in between. It's like a privilege. I can balance it because somehow it's not easy just to come in. Immediately they see the root and the skin color are from Rwanda. That's okay. I am using it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you do lose something because, I mean, whatever is happening in the society is also happening to you. And I feel like you should be a stronger part of the conversation. You know, like, yeah, you are Rwandan, but you're also a writer in Germany who can analyze and contribute to, you know, the discussion and the conversation.
Yeah, I also believe so, but it's the system. It's
Yeah.
not like the for sure. Yeah, the question I had for you was, how did you feel, for example, after writing your personal story, like having your personal story out, if you felt like a change in the way you're writing or
Well, in the beginning, you know, because for example, I wrote one of the essays is about an abortion, which is very private and personal, and I felt like it was because in Sweden it's legal to have abortions, and I felt it was sort of a, you know, a feminist duty to say how else it could be done than in Germany, because in Germany it's you stay crime free, you know, like you don't, but it's a different view of it. So, and then when I noticed people were reading it and writing about it and talking about it, I was like, oh my God, actually this is out there. You know, I knew I was writing it, but I also didn't understand people would read it, you know, and relate to it. And in the beginning, it freaked me out a bit, like it did you. And then I had a similar experience as you when I met young people, especially young women or young people at my readings, and how they related to it. That was so rewarding and gave me so much, such a good feeling about how important it was also for others, or for me to have written this, and that sharing it was, yeah, making myself vulnerable, but I have mainly had positive feedback, you know, so I don't regret it. And I think in a way we writers are always our own material, you know. I mean, we can camouflage it, we could say it's fiction, but in the end we always kind of write ourselves, you know.
yeah.
It's always it's everything is about you, but it's a different story about you.
Yeah, I mean, some writers say they're every character in their novels, you know, like they're all of them. So,
Okay, Azal, I want to wrap this up. The question I want to ask you is, because Tete has told us about her awesome upcoming 2023, which we'll be looking out for. What is your 2023 looking like?
mine, I am actually doing a lot of, I'm doing a few speeches and events where I moderate or I take some. My 2023 is a lot about stepping out there and talking to people, and in case my publisher is listening, also writing. I have to write my next book. So I'm mainly writing and doing a few other things on the side, and of course being a parent as well. You know.
I want to
Sharon
continue.
wrote something again. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Sharon. She says it's beautiful to listen to how much your experiences and identities are tied to your writing, and also how you position yourselves in the market. Also, Azal, any chance of coming to the continent?
Oh, I would love to. Please invite me. I mean, if there's any good,
You can go with me. October next year, I'm going.
please invite me. I would love to come. I absolutely would. but there's nothing planned as of yet. But maybe that's also in the stars for me for 2023. I would love to.
So maybe Tete has invited you, man. You guys make the hookup and make sure you come with her. Will you be coming to
Kigali? Yeah.
I will be coming to Rwanda and Burundi.
So Rwanda and Burundi in October.
Yeah.
Okay. So I also need to budget to come at that time. And you, Tete, like you've already told us about your 2023, but I mean, I want to learn, because you've only been doing this for 3-4 years now. What do you consider to be like one of your real highlights of being in this industry?
One of my real highlights. Okay. My highlight is the impact that I'm making in 2 societies, like 2 communities, something that I have never thought about it before, and also seeing how my world are changing, like communities, people making impact. I like to work with the youth, and they are like mainly my audience. So I enjoy it when we click and I realize like, so they film and they go home and they share also their stories away. And also the people that I connect with, other writers or publishers or people who are working in politics mainly. I like politics, like getting to know what's going on here and also analyzing if this is actually the way it has to be. Why doesn't it go also differently? And something like that. So the platform that I'm entering and spaces that I'm taking. And my other highlight is that this year, for example, I went back to theater, and now I have the room to write theater, play myself, and also direct it at the same time, which I didn't do before. And in the future, I think I would be taking like some part of my book, create a theater piece from the book that I wrote and direct it myself. This will be a highlight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where can we get your books? Because you've been talking about Barefoot in Germany. Where can we get it?
So I know, like for example, online people can get it from Amazon and everywhere. In Kenya, people can get it from I forgot the shop. But someone.
Is it Nuria or Prestige?
No, I don't know the name of the shop, but someone called Lorna Dikiza. She even hosts a book fair in Kenya. She knows, she's the person to contact. And then in Rwanda, there's a bookshop. Ikirezi Library is like the best in the country. They are selling the book. They are like my local distributor. And for the German version, anywhere on the German territory where books are sold.
What about other parts of Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa?
Those ones, I would have to check with my distributor in Rwanda where they have distributed. They are the ones who represent me on the continent.
Okay. What about you, Asal? Can we get your books, your stuff in Germany? And but I guess we have to be speaking in German.
Unfortunately, yes, it's a German.
So there's nothing in French or English yet. So
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, as I said, there's this website which is called New Books in German, and they often have sample translations on that website where you can find my book. And that, in a way, if you want to ask me about my highlight, I would like to answer that question. My highlight, in a way, is because I'm sure some people are watching who write as well, and it's absolutely rewarding to at some point notice that you don't get paid for writing something, but you write something and you get paid for that. Whatever you want to write is people are interested in suddenly, and this shift from writing up something that someone has asked me to write to picking what I want to write about and still getting paid for it. It's just a mind-blowing experience as a writer, I think, that especially when you come from journalism, because you often have to just write whatever people want you to write about. And I think that is a very rewarding experience for writers.
What a wonderful way to wrap up this evening. Thank you so much, Asal. Thank you, Tete, for joining us. We chatted about memoir writing and other things. And I'm hoping whoever listens to this later and whoever tuned in, you've had a very enlightening experience. Thank you, Asal and Tete.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both as well.